The morning sun cast long shadows across Nellis Air Force Base as Captain Elena Vasquez adjusted her headset one final time before climbing into the cockpit of her A-10 Thunderbolt II. The aircraft, affectionately known as the Warthog, sat like a battle-scarred guardian among the sleek F-16 Fighting Falcons that dominated the flight line. While the younger pilots joked about her ancient bird being a relic from another era, Elena knew something they didn't. Sometimes experience and firepower matter more than speed and flash. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 42, Elena was considered geriatric by fighter pilot standards, in a profession where most washed out before 35. Her weathered hands showed the calluses of 2 decades in military aviation, and her steel-gray eyes held the weight of missions that had tested the limits of both machine and pilot. The younger F-16 pilots called her grandmother behind her back, their jokes cutting deeper than they realized. What they couldn't know was that in 6 hours, their lives would depend entirely on this so-called ancient warrior and her supposedly obsolete aircraft. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beyond the perimeter fence of Nellis Air Force Base, its harsh beauty reflecting the unforgiving nature of military aviation. Elena Vasquez had called this place home for the past 3 years, ever since her transfer from overseas operations had landed her in what many considered the aircraft boneyard of elite fighter aviation. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, with its distinctive twin engines mounted high on the fuselage, and its massive GAU-8 cannon protruding from the nose like a metallic fang, was a far cry from the nimble fighters that most pilots dreamed of flying. The morning briefing room buzzed with the confident energy of youth as Elena entered, her flight suit bearing the faded patches of multiple deployments. The F-16 pilots clustered around the coffee station, their conversation peppered with technical jargon about thrust-to-weight ratios and supersonic capabilities. They fell silent as Elena passed, not out of respect, but out of the awkward discomfort that came with acknowledging someone they considered past their prime. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, the squadron's commanding officer, stood at the front of the room studying weather reports with the intensity of someone whose career depended on flawless execution. At 38, Webb represented the new generation of Air Force leadership, politically astute, technologically savvy, and utterly convinced that modern warfare required modern solutions. His tolerance for the A-10 program existed purely because Pentagon politics demanded it, not because he believed in its continued relevance. "All right, people, gather around," Webb called out, his voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Today's exercise is designated Red Storm Alpha, a combined air superiority and close air support scenario designed to test integration between fast movers and attack aircraft. His eyes briefly met Elena's before moving on, the contact lasting just long enough to convey polite acknowledgement without genuine engagement. The mission parameters appeared on the large display screen, showing a complex battlefield scenario that would challenge even experienced pilots. 2 teams of F-16s would engage in air-to-air combat while Elena's A-10 provided close air support for simulated ground forces. On paper, it looked like a standard training exercise. In reality, it was designed to showcase the F-16's versatility, while relegating the A-10 to a supporting role that emphasized its limitations rather than its strengths. Captain Ryan Mitchell, 28 years old and the unofficial leader of the younger pilots, raised his hand with a confident smirk. That had become his trademark. "Sir, given the A-10 speed limitations, how do we coordinate timing when our birds can literally fly circles around the Warthog?" His question drew chuckles from his fellow F-16 pilots, the kind of casual disrespect that had become normalized over months of similar interactions. Webb's response was diplomatically neutral, but Elena caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he shared Mitchell's sentiment. Captain Vasquez has extensive experience in close air support operations. I'm sure she'd adapt to the mission requirements." The words were technically supportive, but their tone suggested accommodation rather than confidence. Elena remained silent during this exchange, her expression giving nothing away. She had learned long ago that defending herself against such comments only provided more ammunition for those determined to see her as a liability. Instead, she focused on the tactical display, mentally calculating approach vectors and engagement zones with the precision that came from years of turning theory into survival. The briefing continued with detailed weather reports, communication protocols, and safety procedures. Elena absorbed every detail while simultaneously running her own mental checklist of A-10 capabilities that weren't mentioned in the official parameters. The Warthog might be slower than the F-16s, but it carried advantages that speed alone couldn't provide: superior loiter time, devastating firepower, and the kind of armor that could absorb punishment that would destroy lighter aircraft. As the pilots filed out toward the flight line, Elena overheard Captain Jessica Chun, one of the few female F-16 pilots in the squadron, talking to Mitchell about generational differences in aviation. I respect her service," Chun said, her voice pitched low but still audible. "But flying an A-10 in modern combat is like bringing a musket to a gunfight. The aircraft was designed for a war that ended before most of us were born." Mitchell's response carried the casual cruelty of youth, convinced of its own superiority. "At least muskets were cutting-edge technology once. The Warthog was outdated the day it rolled off the assembly line. We're basically babysitting a flying antique and hoping it doesn't slow us down too much." The comments stung more than Elena cared to admit, partly because they echoed doubts she sometimes harbored about her own relevance in an evolving military landscape. The A-10 had indeed been designed for a specific type of warfare: close air support in high-threat environments where precision and survivability mattered more than speed. But as military strategy shifted toward rapid deployment and technological superiority, aircraft like hers were increasingly viewed as expensive relics, consuming resources that could be better allocated to more modern platforms. Elena's path to the A-10 had been neither planned nor desired. 15 years earlier, she had been among the elite, flying F-15E Strike Eagles in some of the most demanding combat environments on Earth. Her record spoke of precision strikes, successful rescue missions, and the kind of tactical awareness that separated exceptional pilots from merely competent ones. But a series of events that she rarely discussed had led to her transition away from air superiority fighters and into the unglamorous world of close air support. The official records listed her transfer as voluntary, a career-broadening opportunity that would enhance her tactical knowledge and prepare her for command positions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The reality was more complex, involving personality conflicts with commanding officers who viewed her direct communication style as insubordination, and political maneuvering that had left her with limited options for career advancement. The A-10 assignment had been presented as a temporary posting, a chance to gain experience in a different mission set before returning to faster, more prestigious aircraft. 3 years later, Elena found herself permanently assigned to the Warthog, her requests for transfer either denied or ignored by a personnel system that seemed to have forgotten her existence. She had adapted to the aircraft's unique characteristics, learning to appreciate its brutal effectiveness and uncompromising design philosophy. But adaptation didn't eliminate the sting of being viewed as a second-class citizen in a profession that valued speed and glamour above all else. The pre-flight inspection of her A-10 became a ritual of connection between pilot and machine. Elena's hands moved over control surfaces and weapon systems with the familiarity of long partnership, checking hydraulic pressures and ammunition loads with meticulous attention to detail. The aircraft might not win beauty contests, but its systems were robust and reliable in ways that more sophisticated fighters sometimes weren't. The GAU-8 cannon, the A-10's primary weapon, dominated the aircraft's nose section like a mechanical dragon preparing to breathe fire. Capable of firing depleted uranium rounds at a rate of 3,900 per minute, the cannon could destroy armored vehicles with surgical precision or provide devastating suppressive fire for troops in contact with enemy forces. Elena had seen firsthand what this weapon could accomplish in the right hands, turning desperate situations into tactical victories through sheer concentrated firepower. As she completed her walk-around inspection, Elena noticed Captain Mitchell and his wingman, Lieutenant Brad Foster, conducting their own pre-flight checks on the F-16s parked nearby. Their aircraft gleamed in the morning sun, their sleek lines and advanced avionics representing the cutting edge of fighter technology. The contrast with her own battle-scarred Warthog was stark, and Elena couldn't help but appreciate the aesthetic appeal of the more modern aircraft. Mitchell caught her looking and offered a wave that might have been friendly if not for the smirk that accompanied it. "Try to keep up out there, grandmother," he called out, his voice carrying just enough volume to ensure that nearby ground crew could hear the comment. "We'll try not to leave you too far behind." Elena's response was a simple thumbs up, her expression remaining neutral despite the familiar burn of frustration in her chest. She had learned to pick her battles carefully, understanding that reacting to such provocations only provided ammunition for those who questioned her place in the squadron. Instead, she channeled her energy into preparation, reviewing her mission parameters one final time and running through emergency procedures that might become critical in the complex aerial environment they were about to enter. The relationship between Elena and the younger pilots had deteriorated gradually over the months since her arrival at Nellis. Initially, there had been professional courtesy and grudging respect for her experience and combat record. But as the A-10's limitations became apparent in training exercises designed to showcase F-16 capabilities, attitudes had shifted toward condescension and barely concealed impatience. The generational divide went beyond simple age differences. Elena represented an older approach to military aviation, one that emphasized patience, precision, and the kind of methodical tactical thinking that came from operating aircraft with limited escape options. The F-16 pilots embodied a newer philosophy that valued speed, technology, and the ability to engage multiple targets across vast distances. Both approaches had merit, but institutional pressure clearly favored the latter. Elena's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Webb, exemplified this institutional bias in ways both subtle and overt. His assignments consistently placed Elena in supporting roles that minimized her decision-making authority while highlighting the F-16's versatility. Training scenarios were designed to test air-to-air capabilities where the A-10 had no role, or close air support missions that emphasized rapid response over sustained engagement. The few occasions when Elena had suggested alternative tactical approaches scenarios that would leverage the A-10's unique capabilities had been politely dismissed as interesting but impractical. Webb's feedback consistently praised her professionalism, while subtly questioning her adaptability to modern warfare requirements. The message was clear. Elena was tolerated as a necessary accommodation to Pentagon politics, not valued as a tactical asset. This dynamic had created an environment where Elena felt increasingly isolated from her fellow pilots. The casual camaraderie that defined military aviation culture had largely excluded her, replaced by polite professionalism that maintained necessary working relationships without genuine connection. She ate alone in the dining facility, conducted her own mission planning without input from others, and spent her off-duty hours studying technical manuals rather than socializing with colleagues who saw her as an anachronism. The psychological toll of this isolation was something Elena rarely acknowledged, even to herself. Military pilots were trained to compartmentalize personal concerns and focus on mission requirements, but human nature couldn't be entirely suppressed. The constant subtle messages about her irrelevance had begun to erode her confidence in ways that concerned her during quiet moments of honest self-reflection. Elena's living quarters and the bachelor officers' quarters reflected her solitary existence and practical mindset. The small apartment was spartanly furnished with military-issue furniture and personal items that spoke of function over form. Technical manuals lined makeshift bookshelves, their worn covers testament to countless hours of study and review. Flight gear hung in precise order on wall-mounted hooks, maintained with the meticulous care that separated professional aviators from weekend warriors. The walls displayed few personal touches: a photograph of Elena receiving her initial pilot certification, another showing her standing beside an F-15E in an undisclosed overseas location, and a commendation letter from a commanding officer who had rotated out of the service years earlier. Missing were the typical displays of social connection that filled most military quarters: photos with friends, mementos from shared experiences, evidence of relationships that extended beyond professional obligations. Elena's evening routine had become as regimented as her flight preparations. After completing daily training requirements and administrative tasks, she would spend hours reviewing tactical publications and aircraft technical orders, constantly updating her knowledge of systems and procedures that might prove critical in combat situations. This dedication to continuous learning had always been part of her character, but it had intensified during her time with the A-10, as she sought to maximize every advantage her aircraft could provide. The isolation wasn't entirely unwelcome. Elena had always been somewhat introverted, preferring the company of books and technical challenges to the often superficial social interactions that dominated military culture. But complete social isolation carried risks that she was beginning to recognize. Professional relationships were crucial for career advancement, and her self-imposed exile from squadron social dynamics was limiting her opportunities for meaningful assignments and command positions. The morning of Red Storm Alpha brought the familiar mixture of anticipation and apprehension that preceded any significant training exercise. Elena arrived at the squadron building before dawn, using the quiet hours to review weather reports and mission parameters without interruption. The empty briefing room allowed her to study the tactical display in detail, identifying potential challenges and opportunities that might not be apparent during the formal briefing. The weather forecast showed clear skies with moderate winds, ideal conditions for the complex maneuvering that the exercise would require. Elena noted the wind patterns carefully, understanding that her A-10's lower speed would make her more vulnerable to turbulence and crosswinds that the F-16s could power through without difficulty. Every detail mattered when flying an aircraft with limited performance margins. As other pilots began arriving for the formal briefing, Elena positioned herself in the back of the room where she could observe without becoming the focus of attention. The younger pilots clustered in their usual groups, their conversation animated by the competitive energy that preceded any exercise where their skills would be evaluated and compared. Elena listened to their discussions about engagement tactics and aircraft capabilities, noting their confidence and their casual dismissal of threats they had never actually faced. Lieutenant Colonel Webb's briefing was comprehensive and professional, covering all the necessary elements for a safe and effective training exercise. But Elena detected subtle biases in the way he described the mission objectives and performance metrics. The scenarios were structured to reward speed and maneuverability while minimizing the importance of sustained firepower and target precision areas where the A-10 excelled. It wasn't necessarily intentional bias, but it reflected an institutional mindset that valued certain capabilities over others. The communications plan assigned Elena a secondary frequency that would keep her connected to overall mission coordination without interfering with the primary air-to-air engagements. This arrangement made tactical sense but also reinforced her status as a supporting player rather than a primary participant. Elena noted the frequency assignments without comment, though she made mental note of the primary channels in case circumstances required direct coordination with the F-16 pilots. As the briefing concluded and pilots began filing out toward their aircraft, Elena caught fragments of conversations that reinforced the generational and cultural divide between herself and her colleagues. The younger pilots discussed the exercise with the enthusiasm of competitors, eager to prove their superiority, while Elena approached it with the methodical mindset of someone whose survival had often depended on careful preparation and conservative decision-making. The walk to her aircraft provided a few minutes of solitude to center her thoughts and prepare mentally for the complex flying ahead. Elena had learned to use these transition moments to shift from planning mode to execution mode, leaving behind doubts and frustrations to focus entirely on the immediate requirements of safe and effective flying. The A-10 sat waiting on the ramp like a patient warrior, its ungainly appearance belying the devastating effectiveness that lay beneath its armored skin. Ground crew personnel moved efficiently around the aircraft, completing final preparations. With the professionalism that made military aviation possible, Elena exchanged brief greetings with the crew chief, Sergeant Maria Santos, whose knowledge of A-10 systems rivaled that of most pilots. Santos had been working on these aircraft for over a decade, and her expertise had prevented numerous mechanical issues that could have compromised mission success or pilot safety. "Everything looks good, Captain," Santos reported as Elena approached. "Weapon systems all check out. Fuel load is exactly as specified. And I've done an extra inspection of the hydraulic system since he'll be pulling some G's today." The sergeant's professionalism was tinged with genuine concern for pilot safety, the kind of relationship between aircrew and ground crew that formed the backbone of effective military aviation. Elena thanked Santos and began her own detailed inspection of the aircraft, checking items that she could verify personally rather than relying entirely on maintenance reports. Trust was essential in military aviation, but experienced pilots learned to verify critical systems through their own observation whenever possible. The inspection routine also served as a mental preparation exercise, connecting pilot and aircraft in the intimate partnership that would be crucial during the demanding flying ahead. The cockpit of the A-10 embraced Elena like familiar armor. As she settled into the ejection seat and began the startup sequence, unlike the high-tech displays and computerized systems of modern fighters, the Warthog's cockpit emphasized mechanical reliability and intuitive operation. Analog gauges and simple switches dominated the instrument panel, reflecting a design philosophy that prioritized function over sophistication. Elena's hands moved through the startup checklist with unconscious precision, each switch and control activated in the sequence that had been drilled into her through thousands of hours of training and operational flying. The twin turbofan engines spooled up with their characteristic whine, building to the steady rumble that would provide reliable power throughout the mission ahead. The sound was music to Elena's ears, not beautiful in the conventional sense, but deeply satisfying in its promise of dependable performance. Radio check-ins with air traffic control and mission coordination established the communication links that would be crucial for safe operations in the crowded airspace around Nellis. Elena's voice was calm and professional as she reported aircraft status and received clearance for taxi operations, but internally she felt the familiar surge of anticipation that came with the transition from ground operations to flight operations. The taxi to the runway provided opportunities to verify aircraft systems under motion, checking brake effectiveness, steering response, and engine performance at various power settings. Elena noted each system response, comparing actual performance to expected parameters with the attention to detail that separated cautious pilots from accident statistics. The A-10 performed exactly as expected, its robust design providing the reliability that had made it legendary among pilots who flew in harm's way. Formation procedures aligned. Elena's aircraft with the F-16S in a loose parade formation that would maintain visual contact during the initial phases of flight while allowing individual aircraft to maneuver as required by their specific mission. Roles. Elena positioned her A-10 slightly behind and to the right of the lead F-16, accepting the subordinate position that reflected her supporting role in the exercise, while maintaining the spacing necessary for safe formation flying. The takeoff role demonstrated the fundamental differences between the aircraft types in ways that reinforced the younger pilots' perceptions about relative capabilities. The F-16s accelerated rapidly down the runway, their powerful engines and lightweight creating impressive climb rates that showcased their performance advantages. Elena's A-10 required more runway and climbed more gradually, its heavily armored structure and massive cannon creating weight penalties that couldn't be overcome through engine power alone. But as the formation climbed toward the exercise area, Elena felt the familiar satisfaction that came with flying an aircraft designed for a specific purpose and executed with uncompromising attention to that mission. The F-16s might be faster and more maneuverable, but the A-10 carried capabilities that no other aircraft could match. In the right circumstances, those capabilities could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The exercise area spread below them like a vast chessboard, where the complex game of modern warfare would play out according to carefully scripted scenarios. Elena reviewed her assigned objectives one final time, understanding her role in the larger tactical picture while remaining alert for opportunities to contribute beyond the minimum requirements. Today's exercise would test not only individual pilot skills but also the integration of different aircraft types in complex operational environments. As the formation approached the initial engagement zone, Elena heard the excited chatter of F-16 pilots preparing for simulated air-to-air combat, their voices carrying the confidence of youth and the enthusiasm of competitors eager to prove their worth. She listened to their tactical discussions with professional interest, noting their approaches to threat assessment and engagement planning. Their tactics were sound within their limited experience, but Elena detected gaps that came from training rather than operational reality. The first phase of Red Storm Alpha was about to begin, and Elena prepared to demonstrate what an experienced pilot could accomplish with a supposedly obsolete aircraft. She had no way of knowing that before the day ended, the dismissive attitudes of her colleagues would transform into desperate gratitude as circumstances forced them to confront the difference between simulation and reality. The ancient Warthog was about to remind everyone that in the unforgiving arena of aerial combat, experience and firepower could matter more than speed and youth. Elena's radio crackled with the mission commander's voice as the exercise officially commenced, and she felt the familiar surge of focus that came with the transition from preparation to execution. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, she was ready to prove that some weapons of war never truly become obsolete. They simply wait for the right moment to remind the world why they were created in the first place. The morning air over the Nevada test range shimmered with heat distortion as the mixed formation of F-16s and Elena's solitary A-10 approached the designated combat zone. Captain Ryan Mitchell's voice crackled through the radio with the casual confidence that had become his trademark, coordinating the initial phase of Red Storm Alpha with the precision of someone who had never faced real consequences for tactical mistakes. "Viper flight, this is lead," Mitchell transmitted, using the F-16's call sign with obvious pride. "We're approaching the merge point. Grandmother, try to stay within 50 miles of the action so we can call you in when we need some heavy lifting." The condescending nickname had stuck among the younger pilots, and Mitchell seemed to take particular pleasure in using it over the radio. where it would be recorded and potentially reviewed by higher command. Elena keyed her microphone with the restraint that had become second nature over months of similar provocations. Hog 7 copies all, maintaining assigned altitude and heading. Her voice carried none of the irritation that simmered beneath. The surface, the product of decades spent learning when to engage and when to preserve energy for battles that actually mattered. The exercise scenario placed two teams of F-16s in simulated air-to-air combat, while Elena provided close air support for hypothetical ground forces operating in the mountainous terrain below. On paper, it was a reasonable training evolution, designed to test coordination between different mission sets. In practice, it was structured to highlight the F-16's versatility, while relegating the A-10 to a peripheral role that emphasized its limitations rather than its unique capabilities. Lieutenant Colonel Webb's voice joined the radio chatter from his position as exercise controller, monitoring the evolution from a command aircraft circling at high altitude. All players, remember this is a learning exercise. We want clean engagements and good communication throughout all phases. Hog 7, your target area is grid square Delta 4. Hold at designated coordinates until called forward by Viper Lead. The assignment placed Elena in a holding pattern 20 miles from the primary engagement area, close enough to respond when summoned, but far enough away to avoid interfering with the high-speed maneuvering of the F-16s. Elena acknowledged the instruction and settled into the patient orbit that had become familiar during her time with the A-10. Unlike the aggressive pilots flying air superiority missions, close air support required the ability to wait, watch, and respond with precision when the situation demanded immediate action. The F-16s accelerated away toward their engagement area, their afterburners creating brilliant contrails against the clear desert sky. Elena watched them disappear into the distance while running through her own mission checklist, verifying weapons, systems and communication links that would be critical if she were actually called upon to engage simulated ground targets. The GAU-8 cannon responded to test sequences with mechanical precision, its rotating barrels ready to deliver the kind of concentrated firepower that had made the A-10 legendary among ground troops who understood its capabilities. Radio traffic from the air-to-air engagement grew increasingly animated as the F-16 pilots maneuvered against each other in complex dogfighting scenarios. Elena listened with professional interest, noting tactical decisions and communication patterns that revealed both strengths and weaknesses in their approach to aerial combat. The younger pilots were technically proficient and aggressive in their engagement strategies, but their radio discipline sometimes suffered under the pressure of simulated combat. Viper 2, you've got a bandit at your 6 o'clock, Lieutenant. Foster's voice carried an edge of excitement as he called out threats to his wingmen. Break left and climb, I'll take the shot. The engagement unfolded with the rapid intensity that characterized modern air combat. Aircraft maneuvering at speeds and G-forces that tested both human endurance and mechanical limits. Elena found herself mentally analyzing the tactical situation, despite her peripheral role in the exercise. The F-16 pilots were executing textbook maneuvers with commendable skill, but their focus on individual aircraft performance sometimes came at the expense of broader situational awareness. They were fighting the enemy in front of them without fully considering threats that might emerge from unexpected directions or alternative engagement strategies that could exploit weaknesses in their opponent's tactics. The first phase of Red Storm Alpha concluded with decisive victories for Mitchell's team, their superior positioning and aggressive tactics overwhelming the opposition through speed and precision. The younger pilots' voices carried satisfaction and competitive energy as they reformed for the next phase of the exercise, their confidence reinforced by successful execution of complex aerial maneuvers. Outstanding work, Viper Flight. Webb's voice carried approval as he reviewed the engagement from his control aircraft. Clean kills, good communication, and professional execution throughout. Prepare for Phase 2. Close air support coordination with HOG-7. Elena felt a familiar mix of anticipation and apprehension as her role in the exercise shifted from observer to primary participant. Close air support required different skills than air-to-air combat, emphasizing precision and patience over speed and aggression. The A-10 had been designed specifically for this mission, its weapon systems and flight characteristics optimized for the kind of careful, methodical engagement that could devastate ground targets while minimizing collateral damage. The simulated ground scenario placed friendly forces in contact with enemy positions, dug into defensive positions among the rocky outcroppings that characterized the Nevada terrain. Elena's mission was to suppress enemy fire and destroy hardened targets while avoiding simulated friendly forces operating in close proximity to hostile positions. The exercise required precise navigation, careful target identification, and the kind of surgical weapons employment that separated professional attack pilots from those who simply dropped ordnance in the general vicinity of their objectives. Elena descended from her holding altitude toward the engagement area, the A-10's twin engines providing steady, reliable power as she configured the aircraft for low-altitude operations. Unlike the F-16S that relied on speed for survivability, the Warthog was designed to operate in the heart of enemy defenses, absorbing punishment that would destroy lighter aircraft, while delivering devastating firepower with unprecedented precision. The forward air controller's voice crackled through Elena's headset as she approached the target area, providing the kind of detailed guidance that made the difference between successful close air support and catastrophic fratricide. HOG-7. This is Hammer 2-6. I've got multiple targets for you in grid square, Delta 4 Alpha. Enemy positions are dug in along the ridgeline, approximately 200 meters north of the blue smoke marker. Elena acknowledged the transmission while scanning the terrain below through her targeting systems. The A-10 specialized avionics designed specifically for this type of precision engagement. The aircraft might lack the sophisticated radar and electronic warfare systems of modern fighters, but its targeting systems were optimized for the visual identification and precise engagement that close air support required. Hammer 2-6, HOG-7 has visual on the smoke marker. Confirm friendly positions relative to target area. Elena's professional tone masked the intense concentration required to safely execute close air support operations. Unlike bombing runs against isolated targets, this mission required constant awareness of friendly force locations and the potential for rapidly changing tactical situations that could place non-combatants in danger. The forward air controller provided detailed coordinates and restrictions, painting a complex tactical picture that required careful analysis before any weapons could be employed. Elena processed the information while maneuvering her aircraft into optimal attack position, the A-10's slow speed actually providing advantages in the scenario by allowing extended observation time and multiple attack options. Meanwhile, the F-16 pilots maintained their high-altitude patrol, providing overwatch for the close air support operation while remaining ready to engage any simulated air threats that might emerge during the ground attack phase. Elena could hear their radio chatter as they discussed the proceedings below, their comments revealing both professional interest and subtle dismissal of the methodical approach that close air support required. "Look at grandmother down there." Captain Chun's voice carried amusement as she observed Elena's careful positioning and deliberate target approach. "Takes her 5 minutes to line up a shot that we could make in 30 seconds. The comment drew chuckles from other F-16 pilots, their perspective shaped by the rapid engagement philosophy that dominated air-to-air combat. Elena ignored the commentary while focusing on the complex target identification process that preceded weapons employment. The exercise scenario included multiple simulated threats mixed with friendly positions, requiring the kind of careful analysis that prevented the tragic mistakes that had plagued real-world close air support operations throughout military history. Her first attack run demonstrated the surgical precision that made the A-10's GAU-8 cannon legendary among ground forces. The weapon's depleted uranium rounds could penetrate armored vehicles with devastating effectiveness, but Elena's simulated engagement focused on the accuracy and control that made the difference between mission success and collateral damage. The attack run lasted only seconds, but those seconds represented the culmination of careful planning and precise execution. "Excellent run, Hog 7," the forward air controller reported. "Direct hits on primary targets, no friendly casualties. You're cleared for secondary targets on the eastern ridgeline." The professional approval in his voice reflected genuine appreciation for Elena's skill, a contrast to the casual dismissal she often encountered from her fellow pilots. Elena acknowledged the clearance while positioning for her next attack. The A-10's maneuverability at low altitude, providing options that faster aircraft couldn't match. The Warthog could turn inside the minimum radius of supersonic fighters, allowing multiple attack headings against targets that might be protected from certain approach angles. The second attack run showcased different weapon systems, Elena employing simulated Maverick missiles against hardened targets that required precision rather than area effects. The exercise scenario tested her ability to coordinate multiple weapon types while maintaining situational awareness of friendly forces and potential threats. Each engagement required split-second decisions based on rapidly changing tactical conditions. As Elena completed her assigned targets and began egressing the immediate combat area, an unexpected development transformed the routine training exercise into something far more serious. The radio erupted with urgent transmissions from air traffic control, their calm professionalism replaced by the clipped efficiency that characterized real emergencies. All aircraft, this is Nellis Tower with an emergency broadcast. We have reports of an aircraft down approximately 40 miles northeast of the range complex. Initial reports suggest civilian aircraft with possible survivors. All training operations are suspended pending search and rescue coordination. The announcement sent a chill through Elena as she processed the implications. Civilian aircraft emergencies in the Nevada desert carried serious consequences due to the harsh environment and limited rescue infrastructure. Survivors faced exposure, dehydration, and injury in terrain that could be unforgiving to those without proper equipment and training. Lieutenant Colonel Webb's voice joined the emergency communications as he assumed coordination authority for military assets in the area. All Viper and Hog aircraft maintain current positions while we assess the situation. Nellis Rescue is launching search and rescue assets, but response time will be significant due to distance and terrain challenges. Elena's mind immediately began calculating distances, fuel loads, and response times based on her current position and aircraft capabilities. The A-10's extended loiter time and low altitude performance characteristics made it better suited for search operations than the F-16's, whose high fuel consumption and minimum airspeed limitations reduced their effectiveness in prolonged search patterns. "Tower, this is Hog 7, Elena transmitted, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to making critical decisions under pressure. "I'm currently closest to the reported crash site with sufficient fuel for extended search. Operations. Request permission to investigate and provide initial assessment." The request created a moment of silence on the radio as controllers processed the implications of diverting training aircraft to real-world emergency operations. Military search and rescue protocols required careful coordination to prevent training accidents from becoming additional emergencies. But the severity of civilian emergencies often justified calculated risks. Captain Mitchell's voice cut through the silence with barely concealed incredulence. "Tower, Viper lead can respond faster than the A-10. We should handle the initial reconnaissance and call in appropriate resources." His suggestion carried the implicit assumption that speed was the primary requirement for effective emergency response, ignoring other factors that might be equally important. Elena keyed her microphone before anyone else could respond, her voice carrying quiet confidence born of experience in actual emergency situations. Viper lead. The A-10 can maintain search patterns at speeds and altitudes that provide better visual coverage than high-speed passes. My aircraft is better suited for this mission profile. The radio exchange highlighted fundamental differences in how the pilots viewed aircraft capabilities and mission requirements. Elena understood that search and rescue operations required patience, precision, and the ability to operate effectively at low altitude for extended periods. The F-16s could reach the crash site faster, but their high minimum airspeeds and limited loiter time made them less effective for the methodical search patterns that might be required to locate survivors in difficult terrain. Lieutenant Colonel Webb made the tactical decision with the authority of mission commander, his choice reflecting both aircraft capabilities and pilot experience. Hog 7, you're cleared to proceed to the crash site coordinates. Viper flight will maintain high cover and provide communication relay as needed. All aircraft maintain standard search and rescue protocols. Elena acknowledged the clearance while already turning toward the reported crash coordinates, her navigation systems providing precise heading and distance information. The A-10's slower cruising speed actually provided advantages in this scenario, allowing extended observation time and the ability to modify search patterns based on terrain features and initial findings. As she flew toward the emergency site, Elena felt the familiar surge of purpose that came with real-world missions where her skills and aircraft capabilities would be tested against actual rather than simulated challenges. The younger pilots' dismissive attitudes toward her ancient aircraft were about to be tested against the harsh realities of desert survival and the specialized requirements of search and rescue operations. The Nevada landscape below revealed its true character as Elena descended toward the crash site, the seemingly smooth desert surface resolving into a complex maze of canyons, rock formations, and vegetation that could easily conceal downed aircraft and survivors. This was exactly the kind of environment where the A-10's design philosophy proved its worth, trading speed for the ability to operate effectively in demanding conditions. Elena's radio crackled with updates from search and rescue coordination. As she approached the reported crash area, the professional efficiency of emergency responders contrasting sharply with the competitive banter that had dominated the training exercise. Real emergencies had a way of stripping away pretense and focusing attention on fundamental questions of life and death. Hog 7, this is rescue control. Initial reports suggest a small civilian aircraft with 2 to 4 occupants. Last radar contact was approximately 42 miles northeast of Nellis at Angels 5. Weather conditions are good for visual search, but terrain may complicate rescue operations. Elena absorbed the information while configuring her aircraft for low altitude search patterns, the A-10 systems providing the kind of stable platform that visual reconnaissance required. Unlike high-speed fighters that flew past potential targets in seconds, the Warthog could maintain slow, methodical search patterns that maximized the probability of locating survivors in challenging terrain. The crash site coordinates led Elena into a region of particularly rugged terrain where steep canyons and rocky outcroppings created natural barriers to both aircraft and ground-based rescue efforts. As she began her initial search pattern, Elena realized that this emergency would test not only her flying skills, but also her ability to coordinate complex rescue operations in an environment where mistakes could prove fatal. The F-16 pilots maintained their high-altitude overwatch positions, their radio chatter subdued by the reality of an actual emergency. Elena could hear their professional discussions about fuel states and communication protocols, but the earlier casual arrogance had been replaced by the focused attention that real-world operations demanded. What none of them could anticipate was how the next few hours would transform their understanding of aircraft capabilities, pilot experience, and the true meaning of mission effectiveness. Elena's supposedly obsolete Warthog was about to demonstrate why some military systems transcend their original design parameters to become indispensable tools for saving lives in impossible situations. The wreckage appeared as a silver glint against the red sandstone walls of a narrow canyon, barely visible even from Elena's low-altitude search pattern. The civilian Cessna had impacted on a rocky ledge halfway down the canyon wall, its twisted fuselage wedged between boulders in a position that would challenge even the most experienced rescue teams. Elena banked her A-10 sharply to get a better view, the aircraft's low-speed handling characteristics, allowing her to examine the crash site with precision that would have been impossible in a faster aircraft. Rescue Control, Hog 7 has located the crash site, Elena transmitted, her voice steady despite the grim scene below. Single-engine aircraft appears to have impacted on a ledge approximately 300 feet below the canyon rim. Aircraft is severely damaged but appears intact, unable to determine survivor status from current altitude. The response from search and rescue coordination carried the urgency of professionals racing against time in an environment where every minute could mean the difference between life and death. Hog 7, outstanding work. Can you determine accessibility for ground rescue teams? We're scrambling helicopter assets, but terrain may limit their approach options. Elena continued her orbit of the crash site, the A-10's twin engines providing the reliable power necessary for sustained low-altitude maneuvering in the confined airspace of the canyon system. The terrain below was a maze of vertical walls and narrow passages that would challenge even the most capable rescue helicopters, requiring precise navigation and extraordinary pilot skill to access the crash site safely. As she completed her assessment, Elena noticed movement near the wreckage that sent adrenaline surging through her system. A figure was waving from beside the aircraft, indicating at least one survivor despite the severity of the impact. The discovery transformed the mission from potential body recovery to urgent medical evacuation, dramatically increasing the pressure on rescue coordination and response times. Rescue Control, I have visual confirmation of at least one survivor near the aircraft. Individual appears mobile, but may have additional injured parties. Recommend immediate medical evacuation with trauma capabilities. Elena's training and casualty assessment allowed her to provide crucial information that would influence the medical response configuration and equipment requirements. The radio frequency erupted with coordination traffic as rescue assets throughout the region began responding to the confirmed survivor report. Helicopter crews prepared for challenging mountain rescue operations while medical teams configured equipment for potential trauma cases in remote locations. The professional efficiency of the emergency response system demonstrated the importance of rapid, accurate intelligence from the scene of the accident. Captain Mitchell's voice cut through the coordination chatter with a suggestion that revealed his continued focus on speed over specialized capabilities. Rescue Control, Viper Flight can provide close reconnaissance of the crash site. We can make high-speed passes to gather detailed intelligence for rescue planning. Elena keyed her microphone immediately, her response carrying the authority of someone with direct visual contact with the emergency situation. Viper Lead, high-speed passes will create jet wash that could destabilize loose rocks around the crash site. The survivor appears to be in a precarious position that could be compromised by rotor wash or jet blast. The observation highlighted a critical difference between emergency response experience and tactical aviation training. Elena understood that rescue operations required delicate touch and careful consideration of how aircraft operations might affect survivors and rescue personnel. The aggressive tactics that dominated air-to-air combat could prove counterproductive, or even dangerous in search and rescue scenarios. Lieutenant Colonel Webb's voice joined the discussion with the measured tone of someone processing multiple competing factors in a complex tactical situation. Hog 7, maintain your current orbit and provide continuous observation of the crash site. Viper Flight, establish high-altitude cap and prepare to provide communication relay if terrain interferes with radio contact. The assignment placed Elena in the primary observation role while relegating the F-16s to supporting functions that utilize their capabilities without risking interference with the rescue operation. Elena acknowledged the tasking while positioning her aircraft for optimal observation angles that would allow her to monitor both the survivor and the surrounding terrain for potential hazards. As Elena maintained her vigil over the crash site, she began to notice details that would prove crucial for rescue planning. The survivor appeared to be an adult male who was moving with obvious pain, but seemed capable of limited mobility. More critically, Elena observed what appeared to be a second person lying motionless beside the aircraft wreckage, raising the possibility of serious injuries that would require immediate medical attention. Rescue Control, Hog 7 observes a possible second survivor near the aircraft. Individual appears unconscious or immobilized. Recommend rapid response with full trauma capabilities and possible helicopter hoist operations. Elena's report added urgency to an already critical situation, emphasizing the need for specialized rescue equipment and medical personnel. The coordination between various rescue assets demonstrated the complexity of emergency operations in challenging terrain. Helicopter crews were calculating approach routes and weight limitations, while medical teams prepared equipment for potential helicopter insertion into confined areas. Every decision carried consequences that could affect the survival of people whose lives hung in the balance. Elena's continuous observation revealed additional details about the crash site that would influence rescue planning. The aircraft had apparently struck the canyon wall during an attempt to navigate through the narrow passage, possibly due to sudden weather changes or mechanical failure that had forced the pilot to seek emergency landing options in unsuitable terrain. The wreckage was positioned on a narrow ledge that provided minimal space for rescue operations, requiring precise helicopter flying and specialized equipment to safely extract survivors without causing additional rockfalls or structural collapse. Elena's assessment provided crucial intelligence that allowed rescue coordinators to select appropriate equipment and personnel for the challenging operation ahead. As the first rescue helicopter appeared on the horizon, Elena coordinated her observation activities to avoid interference with the incoming aircraft while maintaining visual contact with the survivors. The rescue helicopter was a specialized mountain rescue variant equipped with hoist capabilities and medical equipment necessary for trauma evacuation from difficult terrain. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through Elena's headset as he approached the canyon system, seeking guidance from her superior vantage point for navigating the complex terrain safely. Hog 7, this is Rescue 2-4. Can you provide guidance for approach to the crash site? Terrain looks challenging from our current position. Elena immediately began providing detailed navigation assistance using her A-10's position and observation capabilities to guide the helicopter through the safest approach route to the crash site. Her ability to maintain continuous observation while providing real-time guidance demonstrated the value of having a dedicated spotter aircraft with extended loiter capabilities. Rescue 2-4, recommend approach from the northeast along the main canyon axis. You'll have moderate downdrafts at the canyon mouth, but winds should be manageable once you're established in the canyon. Be advised the crash site has loose rocks that could be dislodged by rotor wash. The helicopter pilot acknowledged Elena's guidance while beginning his careful approach into the canyon system. Elena watched with professional appreciation as The rescue crew demonstrated extraordinary skill in navigating the challenging terrain, their aircraft dancing through the narrow confines with precision that bordered on artistic. As the rescue helicopter established a hover near the crash site, Elena observed the complex process of inserting rescue personnel onto the narrow ledge while maintaining aircraft stability in the turbulent air currents created by the canyon walls. The operation required split-second timing and absolute trust between crew members operating in an environment where mistakes could prove fatal. The rescue specialist who was lowered to the crash site immediately began assessing the survivors, his professional movements indicating serious injuries that would require careful extraction procedures. Elena relayed his hand signals to the helicopter crew, serving as a communication link when direct radio contact was interrupted by terrain interference. Rescue 2-4, your medic is indicating serious injuries to the second survivor. He's requesting spinal immobilization equipment and possible additional medical personnel. Elena's translation of visual signals provided crucial information that allowed the helicopter crew to modify their procedures and request additional resources as needed. The extraction of the first survivor proceeded smoothly despite the challenging conditions, the conscious male patient being lifted carefully to the helicopter while rescue personnel maintained communication through Elena's aerial relay. His condition appeared stable enough for transport to advanced medical facilities, where comprehensive treatment could be provided. The second survivor presented more complex challenges due to apparent spinal injuries that required extraordinary care during extraction procedures. Elena watched as rescue personnel worked with meticulous precision to stabilize the patient before attempting the dangerous helicopter hoist operation that would carry him to safety. As the rescue operation reached its critical phase, an unexpected emergency transformed the situation from challenging to life-threatening. Captain Mitchell's voice crackled through the radio with barely controlled urgency, reporting a mechanical emergency that would test everyone's capabilities under pressure. Mayday, 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 Viper lead declaring emergency. Engine failure, losing altitude rapidly. Unable to maintain flight toward base. Requesting immediate assistance and emergency vectors. Elena's blood ran cold as she processed the implications of Mitchell's emergency call. The F-16 pilot who had dismissed her aircraft as obsolete was now facing the nightmare scenario that haunted every military aviator: catastrophic mechanical failure in an aircraft with limited gliding capability over hostile terrain. Viper lead, this is Hog 7. What's your current position and altitude? Can you maintain controlled flight? Elena's response carried the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to emergency situations, despite the irony of providing assistance to a pilot who had questioned her relevance just hours earlier. Mitchell's response revealed the desperate nature of his situation as his sophisticated F-16 transformed from a pinnacle of aviation technology into a rapidly falling piece of metal. Hog 7, I'm approximately 15 miles southwest of your position, passing through 8,000 feet and descending rapidly. Engine is completely dead. No restart attempts successful. Elena immediately began calculating intercept vectors and response times while simultaneously coordinating with rescue assets already engaged in the civilian aircraft operation. The situation required splitting limited rescue resources between ongoing operations and a new emergency that could prove equally fatal if not addressed immediately. Rescue control. Hog 7. We have a military aircraft emergency approximately 15 miles southwest of the civilian crash site. F-16 with complete engine failure. Pilot will require immediate air support upon ejection. Elena's report triggered a complex coordination challenge as rescue authorities attempted to manage multiple simultaneous emergencies with limited assets. The rescue helicopter crew monitoring the emergency frequency faced an impossible decision between completing the civilian rescue operation and responding to the military aircraft emergency. Both situations involved human lives hanging in the balance, but rescue assets couldn't be in two places simultaneously. Elena made a tactical decision that would define her legacy among the pilots who had dismissed her capabilities. Rescue 2-4, continue your current operation. I'm responding to the F-16 emergency and will provide assistance until additional SAR assets arrive on scene. The announcement sent shockwaves through the radio frequencies as pilots and rescue coordinators processed the implications of an A-10 pilot volunteering to provide emergency assistance to a fighter aircraft in distress. Elena's aircraft lacked the speed to quickly reach Mitchell's position, but it carried capabilities that might prove crucial for survival in the harsh desert environment. Elena pushed her A-10's throttles forward to maximum power while turning toward Mitchell's last reported position, the twin turbofan engines providing reliable thrust that would be maintained throughout the emergency response. Unlike the single-engine F-16 that could become a helpless glider with one mechanical failure, the A-10's redundant systems provided multiple backup options for continued flight. Viper lead, Hog 7 is en route to your position. What's your current altitude and rate of descent? Are you considering ejection or attempting dead-stick landing? Elena's question sought to establish the timeline and options available for Mitchell's survival, critical information for coordinating rescue efforts. Mitchell's voice carried the strain of a pilot facing mortality while fighting to maintain aircraft control with rapidly diminishing options. Hog 7, passing through 6,000 feet with high sink rate. Terrain below is unsuitable for landing attempt. We'll probably have to punch out within the next few minutes. Elena's mind raced through the implications of ejection over the Nevada desert, calculating survival times and rescue challenges that Mitchell might not have considered in his focus on immediate aircraft control. Ejection would save his life in the short term, but survival on the ground would depend on factors beyond his current training and equipment. Viper lead, be advised you're approaching mountainous terrain with limited landing sites for rescue helicopters. If you eject, try to steer toward the flatter areas to the east. Your survival radio has GPS capability, activated immediately upon landing. Elena's guidance drew on desert survival training that many fighter pilots overlooked in their focus on high-altitude, high-speed operations. As Elena raced toward Mitchell's position, she could see his F-16 in the distance, trailing a thin stream of vapor that indicated serious mechanical problems beyond simple engine failure. The sophisticated fighter aircraft had epitomized technological superiority was rapidly becoming a liability that threatened its pilot's survival. Mitchell's ejection came at the worst possible moment, his seat firing just as his aircraft passed over a particularly rugged section of terrain, filled with steep canyons and rocky outcroppings. Elena watched the parachute deploy properly, but his descent trajectory carried him toward terrain that would challenge even experienced ground rescue teams. Rescue control, Hog 7 has visual on successful ejection. Pilot under good shoot, descending toward grid square Charlie 7. Terrain is extremely rugged with limited access for ground vehicles. Will require helicopter extraction. Elena's report provided crucial information for rescue coordination, while she maneuvered to maintain visual contact with the descending pilot. The irony of the situation was not lost on Elena, as she began coordinating rescue efforts for a pilot who had questioned her aircraft's relevance just hours earlier. Mitchell's survival now depended entirely on the capabilities of the ancient A-10 and its supposedly obsolete pilot, a reversal of fortune that highlighted the unpredictable nature of aviation emergencies. Elena established an orbit over Mitchell's landing site, using her aircraft's loiter capabilities to maintain constant observation, while coordinating with rescue assets that were still engaged in the civilian aircraft operation. The A-10's extended endurance provided crucial advantages in this scenario, allowing sustained operations that faster aircraft couldn't match. Viper lead, this is Hog 7. Do you copy on survival radio? Elena's transmission sought to establish communication with Mitchell after his parachute landing, hoping to assess his condition and provide guidance for ground survival until rescue assets could reach his position. Mitchell's response came through weak and distorted, indicating possible equipment damage or terrain interference that complicated communication efforts. Hog 7, Viper lead on survival radio. I'm on the ground with minor injuries but in rough terrain. Can't see any flat areas suitable for helicopter landing. Elena's assessment of the terrain confirmed Mitchell's observations about helicopter accessibility. The rocky canyons and steep slopes would require specialized rescue techniques and equipment that might not be immediately available given the ongoing civilian rescue operation. Mitchell faced potential hours or even overnight survival in desert conditions that could prove challenging for someone equipped only with standard ejection seat survival gear. Viper lead. Maintain your current position and conserve energy. I'm coordinating rescue assets and will maintain overwatch until help arrives. Activate your emergency beacon if you haven't already done so. Elena's instructions reflected standard survival procedures, but the reality of desert rescue operations often exceeded textbook scenarios in complexity and duration. As Elena maintained her aerial vigil over Mitchell's position, she realized that the rescue operation would require innovative solutions that leveraged every available capability. The civilian rescue helicopter was still engaged in extracting the second crash victim, leaving limited assets available for immediate response to Mitchell's emergency. Elena made another tactical decision that would demonstrate the true value of her aircraft and experience. She contacted the rescue helicopter directly, proposing a coordination plan that would utilize both aircraft's unique capabilities to save lives in impossible circumstances. Rescue 2-4, Hog 7. Once you complete your current evacuation, I can provide precise navigation guidance to the military pilot's position. My aircraft can maintain station keeping while you conduct the extraction, providing communication relay and hazard assessment. The rescue helicopter pilot's response reflected professional appreciation for Elena's proposal and understanding of the complex challenges they faced together. Hog 7, that sounds like our best option. Your aircraft's loiter time will be crucial for this operation. Stand by for completion of current mission, then we'll coordinate approach to the military site. As the civilian rescue reached its conclusion with successful extraction of both survivors, Elena felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation about the operation ahead. Mitchell's survival would depend on the coordination between the supposedly obsolete A-10 and the specialized rescue helicopter, a partnership that would validate capabilities that speed-focused aviation culture often overlooked. The rescue helicopter's approach to Mitchell's position required Elena's precise guidance through terrain that challenged even experienced mountain rescue crews. She coordinated the complex approach while monitoring Mitchell's condition and maintaining communication with rescue coordination authorities, who were managing multiple simultaneous operations. Rescue 2-4. Recommend approach from the north along the ridgeline. You'll have moderate downdrafts, but the terrain provides better escape routes if you encounter mechanical problems. Be advised the pilot is approximately 50 meters east of the prominent rock formation. The extraction operation unfolded with extraordinary precision as Elena provided real-time guidance and hazard assessment, while the rescue crew demonstrated remarkable skill in challenging conditions. Mitchell's rescue succeeded because of coordination between aircraft types that complemented each other's capabilities rather than competing for supremacy. As the rescue helicopter lifted off with Mitchell safely aboard, Elena felt a profound sense of accomplishment that transcended the competitive dynamics that had dominated squadron relationships. The successful rescue demonstrated that aviation effectiveness couldn't be measured solely in terms of speed and technology, but required understanding how different capabilities could work together to achieve impossible missions. Elena's radio. crackled with Mitchell's voice as he was transported to medical facilities, his tone carrying gratitude and humility that contrasted sharply with his earlier arrogance. "Hog 7, this is Viper Lead. I owe you my life today. Thank you for everything you did to get me out of there." The transformation in Mitchell's attitude represented more than personal gratitude. It reflected a fundamental shift in understanding about aircraft capabilities and pilot worth that would ripple through the squadron and beyond. Elena's response carried the quiet dignity that had sustained her through months of dismissive treatment from colleagues who now understood her true value. "Viper Lead, that's what we do for each other. Glad you're safe." Elena's simple response reflected her understanding that true professionalism didn't require vindication or recognition, but found satisfaction in mission accomplishment and the knowledge that when it mattered most, her skills and aircraft had proved their worth beyond any doubt. As Elena turned her attention toward home base, she reflected on the day's events and their implications for her relationship with the squadron and her own sense of purpose. The ancient Warthog had saved lives that sophisticated F-16s couldn't reach, proving that in the unforgiving arena of emergency operations, experience and specialized capabilities often mattered more than speed and technology. The radio frequencies buzzed with coordination traffic as rescue operations concluded and aircraft returned to base. But Elena flew in contemplative silence, understanding that everything had changed in ways that couldn't be measured by official reports or performance evaluations. Respect, once lost, had been regained through actions rather than words, and the supposedly obsolete pilot had reminded everyone why some warriors never truly become ancient. They simply wait for the right moment to demonstrate why they were forged in the first place. The debriefing room at Nellis Air Force Base bore the weight of silence as Elena entered, her flight suit still bearing traces of the desert dust that had marked the most significant day of her military career. The assembled pilots sat with uncharacteristic stillness, their usual competitive banter replaced by the sobering reality of what they had witnessed during Red Storm Alpha's unexpected transformation from routine exercise to life-or-death emergency. Captain Ryan Mitchell occupied a chair near the front of the room, his left arm in a sling from injuries sustained during his ejection. But his physical discomfort paled beside the obvious psychological impact of owing his life to the pilot he had dismissed as irrelevant just hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The most vocally dismissive critic of Elena's capabilities now owed his survival to her expertise and her supposedly obsolete aircraft. Lieutenant Colonel Webb stood at the podium with the demeanor of an officer, forced to confront fundamental assumptions about aircraft capabilities and pilot effectiveness. The day's events had shattered his carefully constructed worldview about modern aviation superiority, leaving him to reconcile official doctrine with undeniable evidence that contradicted everything he thought he understood about tactical aviation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb began, his voice carrying uncharacteristic hesitation, "today's exercise evolved beyond our planned parameters in ways that none of us anticipated. What began as routine training became a real-world demonstration of capabilities that deserve our closest examination and honest assessment." Elena took a seat in the back of the room, maintaining the low profile that had become second nature during her time at Nellis. But the usual invisibility felt different now, charged with an awareness that every pilot present understood her role in the day's events and its implications for their own assumptions about aviation effectiveness. Webb continued his opening remarks with obvious difficulty, struggling to frame events that had demolished months of subtle messaging about A-10 irrelevance and pilot hierarchy. Captain Vasquez demonstrated exceptional airmanship and mission effectiveness during both the civilian aircraft emergency and the subsequent military rescue operation. Her actions directly resulted in the successful rescue of 4 individuals who might not have survived without her intervention. The formal acknowledgement carried weight beyond its careful phrasing, representing an institutional admission that speed and sophistication didn't automatically translate to mission effectiveness. Elena listened without expression, understanding that official recognition mattered less than the personal transformations she had witnessed in her fellow pilots during the crisis. Captain Jessica Chun raised her hand with obvious reluctance, her usual confidence tempered by the day's revelations about her own limitations and assumptions. "Sir, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Those of us flying F-16s have capabilities that we assumed made us superior to attack aircraft, but today proved that mission effectiveness depends on much more than raw performance specifications." Chun's admission represented a significant shift from the casual dismissiveness that had characterized squadron attitudes toward Elena and her aircraft. The younger pilot was acknowledging not just Elena's competence, but the fundamental flaws in the thinking that had led to months of professional isolation and personal disrespect. Elena finally spoke, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had sustained her through the day's challenges. The A-10 was designed for specific mission requirements that don't always align with modern aviation priorities. But emergency situations don't respect our preferences about aircraft types or mission roles. When people's lives are at stake, the only thing that matters is what works. Her response avoided the vindication or criticism that others might have expected, focusing instead on mission effectiveness and professional responsibility. Elena understood that sustainable change required education rather than confrontation, building understanding rather than deepening divisions between different aviation communities. Lieutenant Brad Foster, Mitchell's usual wingman, struggled with questions that went beyond aircraft capabilities to fundamental issues of character and professional judgment. "Captain Vasquez, I owe you an apology for attitudes that I now realize were both unprofessional and ignorant. We treated you and your aircraft as obsolete without understanding what you brought to our mission capabilities." The apology carried genuine remorse that reflected personal growth forced by circumstances that had stripped away illusions about aviation superiority. Foster's willingness to acknowledge his mistakes publicly demonstrated the kind of character development that could only come from confronting uncomfortable truths about one's own limitations. Elena's response reflected the grace that had sustained her through months of professional isolation without bitterness or resentment. We all make assumptions based on limited experience and institutional messaging. What matters is our willingness to learn from new information and adapt our thinking when evidence contradicts our preconceptions. The discussion that followed revealed the depth of change that a single day's events had produced in pilots who had previously viewed Elena as a liability to squadron effectiveness. Questions came rapidly, covering everything from A-10 capabilities to tactical doctrine, to the integration of different aircraft types in complex operational environments. Captain Mitchell finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone forced to confront fundamental assumptions about his own character and professional judgment. "Captain Vasquez, I need to say something publicly that I should have recognized months ago. Your aircraft and your experience represent capabilities that complement rather than compete with F-16 operations. I was wrong about your relevance, and more importantly, I was wrong about how I treated you as a fellow officer." Mitchell's statement went beyond simple gratitude for rescue assistance to acknowledge the systematic disrespect that had characterized his relationship with Elena since her arrival at Nellis. His willingness to accept responsibility publicly demonstrated genuine character growth that extended far beyond aircraft preferences to fundamental questions about leadership and professional relationships. Elena's response carried the dignity that had sustained her through the darkest periods of professional isolation. "Captain Mitchell, emergency situations reveal character under pressure. Today you demonstrated courage and professionalism under the most challenging circumstances any pilot can face. That's what I'll remember about our shared experience." Her gracious response avoided the opportunity for payback or humiliation that others might have seized, choosing instead to build bridges that could support improved working relationships in the future. Elena understood that sustainable change required forgiveness and forward focus rather than dwelling on past mistakes or missed opportunities. Lieutenant Colonel Webb seized the moment to address broader institutional issues that the day's events had exposed. This debriefing has revealed systematic problems in how we evaluate aircraft capabilities and pilot effectiveness. Moving forward, we need to fundamentally change our approach to mission planning and resource allocation to ensure we're utilizing all our assets effectively. The promise of institutional change represented more than political maneuvering. Webb had witnessed firsthand how preconceptions about aircraft capabilities had nearly cost lives and compromised mission effectiveness. His commitment to reform reflected genuine understanding that diversity in aircraft types and pilot experience created tactical advantages that couldn't be achieved through standardization alone. The formal debriefing concluded with specific recommendations for training modifications, squadron integration improvements, and communication protocols that would prevent the kind of professional isolation that had characterized Elena's experience at Nellis. But the real changes had already occurred in the minds and hearts of pilots who had confronted their own limitations and discovered new respect for capabilities they had previously dismissed. As pilots filed out of the debriefing room, Elena found herself surrounded by colleagues who had barely acknowledged her existence just hours earlier. The conversations were awkward at first, tentative attempts to bridge gaps that had been months in the making, but genuine desire for improved relationships was evident in their efforts. Captain Chun approached Elena with obvious hesitation, searching for words to address months of casual dismissiveness and professional exclusion. "Captain Vasquez, I was wondering if you'd be interested in joining some of us for dinner tonight. We usually go to that Mexican place off base, and I think it's time we got to know each other better as people, rather than just call signs and aircraft types." The invitation represented more than social courtesy. It was an attempt to include Elena in the informal relationships that formed the backbone of squadron culture. Chun's offer acknowledged that professional respect required personal connection, and that Elena's isolation had been both unnecessary and counterproductive to overall squadron effectiveness. Elena accepted the invitation with the understanding that building better relationships would require effort from everyone involved. "I'd like that, Jessica. I think we all learned today that we're stronger when we work together than when we operate in separate silos." The evening gathering at the restaurant revealed Elena as a person rather than just a pilot, allowing her colleagues to discover interests and experiences that had been hidden beneath months of professional distance. Stories emerged about her background, her motivations for military service, and her perspectives on aviation that had been shaped by experiences most of them had never encountered. Captain Mitchell, still nursing his injured arm, found opportunities throughout the evening to express gratitude that went beyond formal acknowledgement of rescue assistance. "Elena, I keep thinking about how close I came to not making it home today. Everything I said about your aircraft being obsolete, about your experience being irrelevant, it was all proven wrong when my life depended on exactly those capabilities I had dismissed." His personal admission carried emotional weight that formal apologies couldn't capture, revealing the depth of his transformation from dismissive competitor to grateful colleague. Mitchell's willingness to acknowledge his mistakes publicly demonstrated character growth that extended far beyond aircraft preferences to fundamental questions about respect and professional relationships. Elena's response reflected the wisdom that came from years of facing adversity with dignity and purpose. "Ryan, emergency situations strip away everything except what really matters. Today you showed courage under pressure and trust in someone you had every reason to doubt. That says more about your character than any mistakes you made earlier." The evening progressed with conversations that revealed common ground between pilots who had previously focused on their differences. Elena's experiences in combat operations provided perspectives that enriched the younger pilots' understanding of aviation's larger purpose, while their enthusiasm and technical knowledge reminded her of aspects of flying that she had forgotten during months of isolation. As the evening wound down, Lieutenant Colonel Webb approached Elena with the serious demeanor of someone preparing to address significant institutional changes. "Elena, I've been thinking about today's events and their implications for how we structure our training and operations. Would you be willing to work with me on developing new integration protocols that leverage the full spectrum of our aircraft capabilities?" The request represented more than professional courtesy. Webb was acknowledging Elena's expertise and seeking her input on fundamental changes to squadron operations. His offer demonstrated genuine recognition that diversity in aircraft types and pilot experience created tactical advantages that required deliberate integration rather than casual coordination. Elena accepted the assignment with the understanding that meaningful change would require sustained effort and institutional support. "Colonel, I think today proved that we're more effective when we understand how different aircraft types complement each other rather than compete. I'd be honored to help develop training that builds on those synergies." The weeks that followed, Red Storm Alpha brought systematic changes to Nellis operations that reflected genuine learning from the day's events. Training scenarios were redesigned to emphasize multi-aircraft coordination rather than single-platform superiority, creating opportunities for pilots to understand how different capabilities could work together to achieve mission objectives. Elena found herself at the center of these changes, her expertise sought by pilots who had previously dismissed her relevance. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete. Institutional cultures changed slowly, and some attitudes required ongoing reinforcement. But the foundation had been laid for sustainable improvement in both professional relationships and operational effectiveness. Captain Mitchell's recovery from his ejection injuries provided opportunities for extended conversations about aviation philosophy and tactical doctrine that had been impossible during their previous competitive relationship. His near-death experience had created genuine appreciation for Elena's skills in aircraft, capabilities that transcended simple gratitude to encompass fundamental respect for different approaches to military aviation. "Elena," Mitchell said during one of their planning sessions, "I've been thinking about how we measure pilot effectiveness and aircraft value. Today's emergency proved that mission success depends on having the right capabilities at the right time, not just the fastest or most sophisticated aircraft." His observation reflected deeper understanding that came from confronting mortality and discovering salvation in capabilities he had previously dismissed. Mitchell's transformation from dismissive competitor to thoughtful colleague demonstrated the kind of personal growth that could only result from genuine crisis and authentic revelation. The broader impact of Red Storm Alpha extended beyond Nellis Air Force Base as word of the day's events spread through military aviation communities. Elena's rescue of both civilian and military personnel using an A-10 became a case study in tactical aviation schools, demonstrating how specialized aircraft capabilities could prove decisive in emergency situations. Professional recognition came in various forms: commendation letters, award nominations, and speaking invitations that acknowledged Elena's exceptional performance during the crisis. But the most meaningful recognition came from her fellow pilots, whose respect had been earned through actions rather than politics, and whose opinions carried weight because they were based on witness competence rather than institutional requirements. Elena's relationship with her A-10 deepened as she came to appreciate how the day's events had validated design decisions made decades earlier by engineers who understood that not all aviation challenges could be solved through speed and sophistication alone. The aircraft's rugged reliability and specialized capabilities had proved their worth in the most demanding circumstances. justifying the faith of those who had championed its continued service. The civilian survivors of the crash that had started the day's emergency sent letters of gratitude that provided perspective on the life and death stakes that military pilots sometimes lost sight of during routine training operations. Their recovery and return to their families served as tangible evidence that Elena's skills and aircraft capabilities had produced outcomes that mattered beyond military evaluations or career advancement. 6 months after Red Storm Alpha, Elena stood before a conference of military aviation professionals, sharing lessons learned from the day that had transformed her relationship with her colleagues and her understanding of her own worth. The audience included pilots from multiple services and aircraft types, all seeking to understand how different capabilities could be integrated more effectively. "The most important lesson from our experience," Elena told the assembled aviators, "is that no single aircraft or pilot type can address all the challenges we face in modern military operations. Effectiveness comes from understanding how different capabilities complement each other and creating systems that leverage those synergies rather than forcing unnecessary competition." Her presentation emphasized cooperation over competition, integration over isolation, and the recognition that diversity in aircraft types and pilot experience created tactical advantages that couldn't be achieved through standardization alone. The concepts weren't revolutionary, but their validation through real-world emergency operations gave them weight that theoretical discussions couldn't provide. Elena's personal transformation paralleled the institutional changes that followed. Red Storm Alpha, the isolation and professional dismissal that had characterized her time at Nellis were replaced by genuine integration into squadron operations and personal relationships that reflected respect earned through demonstrated competence. She had proven that worth wasn't determined by aircraft type or institutional prejudices, but by the ability to perform when performance mattered most. The A-10 Thunderbolt II continued flying missions that no other aircraft could accomplish, its specialized capabilities finding new appreciation among pilots who had previously viewed it as an obsolete relic. Elena's demonstration of what the aircraft could achieve in the right hands had reminded the aviation community that some tools transcended their original design parameters to become indispensable assets for missions that hadn't been imagined when they were created. As Elena completed another training mission months later, flying alongside F-16s in formations that emphasized coordination rather than competition, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from professional exile to genuine integration. The transformation hadn't required changing who she was or what she flew, but rather finding colleagues who could appreciate capabilities that complemented their own. The radio chatter during the mission reflected the camaraderie that had developed between pilots who had learned to value each other's unique contributions rather than competing for supremacy. Elena's voice was welcomed in tactical discussions, her input sought for mission planning, and her aircraft viewed as an essential component of overall squadron capabilities. Captain Mitchell's voice crackled through the communication system as the formation returned to base, his tone carrying genuine warmth that would have been impossible during their early relationship. "Hog 7, thanks for keeping us honest out there. Your perspective on the ground threat assessment helped us develop much better tactics than we would have managed on our own." Elena's response reflected the satisfaction that came from being valued for her actual contributions rather than tolerated as an institutional necessity. Viper lead, that's what integration looks like when it works properly. We're all more effective when we leverage each other's strengths rather than competing over differences. The landing pattern that concluded the mission demonstrated the kind of coordination that had become routine since Red Storm Alpha, aircraft with different performance characteristics working together seamlessly rather than struggling to accommodate incompatible requirements. Elena's A-10 slotted into the pattern with precision that reflected both her skills and her colleagues' understanding of how to utilize different aircraft types effectively. as Elena shut down her aircraft and completed post-flight procedures. She felt the deep satisfaction that came from being exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do, with colleagues who understood and appreciated her contributions. The ancient Warthog had proven its worth beyond any doubt, and its pilot had demonstrated that experience and specialized capabilities could never be truly obsolete. The maintenance crew that greeted Elena as she exited her aircraft included technicians who had witnessed her transformation from isolated outsider to respected squadron member. Their professional greeting carried personal warmth that reflected the broader changes that had occurred throughout the base as attitudes shifted from dismissive tolerance to genuine appreciation. Elena walked toward the squadron building with the confident stride of someone who had found her place in a community that valued her contributions. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the flight line, illuminating aircraft of different types and capabilities that would work together on tomorrow's missions with the coordination that came from mutual respect and shared purpose. The story of the F-16 pilots who had called her ancient would be told and retold throughout military aviation communities, serving as a reminder that effectiveness couldn't be measured solely in terms of speed or sophistication. Elena Vasquez and her A-10 Thunderbolt II had proven that some warriors and weapons transcended their apparent limitations to achieve greatness when circumstances demanded nothing less than their absolute best. The ancient Warthog continued to fly, carrying its pilot in disguise that welcomed both of them as essential components of America's military aviation capability. And Elena Vasquez had learned that true worth wasn't determined by others' recognition or institutional preferences, but by the knowledge that when lives hung in the balance, she and her aircraft could deliver results that no one else could achieve. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.